I make six-figure, bro, but before the next paycheck arrives, I'm already back at zero. Do you understand?
$8,000. That's the median bank account balance in America. Not 80,000, just 8. If you've got more than that sitting in your checking or savings right now, you're literally richer than half of all Americans. Just sit with that for a moment. Half of every household in this country has less than 8 grand in actual liquid cash. And here's what makes this absolutely insane. Everyone keeps saying the economy is booming. Stock markets are breaking records in 2025. Jobs are everywhere. Inflation supposedly cooled down. But if you're watching this right now, chances are you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water. You're not losing your mind. The real numbers tell a completely different story than what you're hearing on the news. I'm John, and I've been diving deep into Federal Reserve reports, consumer finance studies, and financial surveys for months now, and what I've found is going to blow your mind. Because while every headline screams about economic wins and bigger paychecks, the actual reality underneath is totally different. Before we go any further, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button right now because this information could literally change your financial life, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I want to know if this hits the same way wherever you are. Let's get into what's really happening with the average American's money in 2026, and more importantly, where you actually fit into all of this. Here's the number that should make your blood run cold. Right now, 67% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 2 out of every 3 people. And before you think this is just broke people working minimum wage jobs, think again. This includes people pulling in 6 figures. Lawyers, engineers, corporate managers, all stuck in the exact same trap. Money comes in. It disappears instantly into mortgages or rent, car notes, groceries that somehow doubled in price over the last 4 years. And by the time the next paycheck arrives, they're back at zero. This isn't a poverty issue. This is a trap that's eating the middle class alive. But wait, it gets worse. Almost 1 in 4 Americans, that's 24%, have absolutely zero emergency savings. Nothing. No safety net, no backup plan, nothing standing between them and total financial disaster. If their car dies, if they get sick, if the furnace breaks, they're instantly in full panic mode. And this isn't happening because people are careless with money. It's happening because after paying for basic survival, there's literally nothing left to save. Meanwhile, 54% of households don't have any retirement savings whatsoever. Zero.
They're not planning for tomorrow because they can't afford to make it through today. Now let's talk about the elephant stomping around the room, inflation. You've probably heard that inflation is getting better, that things are calming down. Technically, yeah, that's true. The speed of price increases has slowed down, but here's the part nobody wants to tell you. The damage is already done and it's permanent. Prices for basically everything are roughly 25% higher right now than they were in 2020. A 25% jump on everything. Your grocery bill, your insurance premiums, your rent, all of it costs a quarter more than just a few years ago. And did wages jump 25%? Absolutely not. Most people got maybe a 10% raise if they were lucky. The gap between what everything costs and what people actually earn has turned into a massive canyon, and nobody's building a bridge across it. The vibe is broken and everyone feels it. 32% of Americans think their personal finances are going to get worse in 2026. That's the highest level of money pessimism we've seen since 2018. Think about that for a second. Despite all the positive news reports, 1 out of every 3 people is looking at this year thinking, I'm about to get crushed financially. And honestly, they're probably right. The split-screen economy is completely real. If you own assets, stocks, property, you probably had an amazing 2025. Your net worth probably grew on paper. But if you're just living off your paycheck alone, if you're trading your hours for money and trying to stretch it to cover everything, statistically you're probably falling further and further behind. And here's the part that'll make your jaw drop. Americans were asked how much money they'd need to actually feel wealthy in 2026. The answer they gave, $2.5 million in net worth. That's not even retire forever and never think about money again money. That's just feel wealthy money. The amount people say they need to retire without panicking has hit $1.26 million. Let that sink into your brain. The average person believes they need over $1 million saved just to stop working without constant anxiety. And yet, as you're about to see, what most Americans actually have saved for retirement isn't even close to that. Not even in the same universe. So where do you actually stand? Because here's the thing about numbers. Averages are liars. When you hear that the average American has $91,000 saved for retirement at age 40, that sounds pretty okay, right? but that number gets skewed by the rich people at the top. The person with $2 million saved pulls that average way up, making everyone else look better than they really are. What you actually need to know is the median, the exact middle point where half the people are above it and half are below it, the real middle. Let's break this down by age because this is where things get really uncomfortable. If you're under 25, the median retirement savings is about $2,800. Yeah, you read that right, $2,800. For people aged 25 to 34, it jumps to around $15,000. Still nowhere near enough to retire on, obviously, but it's a starting point. By ages 35 to 44, the median hits about $35,500. So if you're 40 years old sitting on $40,000 saved, you might look at that average of $91,000 and feel like a total failure. But you're not. You're actually ahead of the median American. You're literally doing better than half the country. Things improve slightly as people get older. The 45 to 54 age group has a median of about $61,500 saved. People aged 55 to 64, the ones who can see retirement approaching fast, have a median of $87,500. And people 65 and older, already retired or about to be, have around $88,500. Let me be brutally clear here. $88,000 is nowhere near enough to actually retire on. If you're pulling 4% per year from that, you're getting $3,500 annually. That's $291 per month. You absolutely cannot live on that. Social Security helps, sure, but the average Social Security check is only about $1,900 monthly. Add that to your savings withdrawal and you're looking at maybe $2,200 a month to live on. That's incredibly tight, dangerously tight. Now let's talk about debt, because savings are only half the picture. Debt is the massive anchor dragging everyone down, and it's spread out unevenly across different age groups. Gen Z, the youngest adults aged 18 to 28, have an average debt load of about $34,000. That sounds manageable until you realize it's mostly student loans and car payments, and they're just getting started in their careers. Millennials aged 29 to 44 are carrying an average of $132,000 in debt. Mortgages are the main driver here, but also student loans that just never disappear, and credit cards constantly filling the gap between what they earn and what they need to spend. But the real debt champions, Gen X people aged 45 to 60, are carrying an average of $158,000 in debt, the highest of any generation. They're the sandwich generation, paying for their kids' college while also helping their aging parents financially, all while desperately trying to save for their own retirement that's racing toward them. They're getting crushed from both directions, and the numbers show it clearly. Baby boomers aged 61 to 79 have an average debt of about $92,000. Lower than Gen X, but still massive, especially for people who theoretically should be slowing down. Many are still paying off their homes or financially supporting family members, and it's destroying whatever retirement cushion they managed to build. And then there's credit card debt, the trap that just keeps taking and taking. The average credit card balance for people who carry debt is nearly $7,000, but here's the number that should absolutely terrify you. 46% of credit card holders do not pay off their full bill every month. Nearly half the country is paying 20% interest or higher on their balances. That's not debt. That's literally a tax on being broke. If you're carrying a $7,000 balance at 22% interest and only making minimum payments, you'll be paying that off for years and years while the bank collects thousands in interest. It's designed specifically to keep you stuck. So how do you compare? Are you ahead of the median or behind it? Are you part of that 67% living paycheck to paycheck, or have you somehow managed to carve out a little breathing room? The answer matters because understanding exactly where you stand is the first crucial step to actually changing it. And there's way more to unpack here, because the numbers get even more eye-opening when you zoom in on the actual financial behaviors and choices people are making right now. Let's dig into what people are actually doing with their money right now, because the behavior patterns show something fascinating. It's not just about how much you have saved, it's about the choices being forced on people under massive financial pressure, and those choices are creating a domino effect that's making everything worse. First, the savings rate. Americans are currently saving about 3.5% of their income. That's pathetically low. The historical average is closer to 8%, and financial experts say you need at least 20% if you want to actually build real wealth. But 3.5%, that means for every dollar you earn, you're keeping 3.5 cents. Everything else evaporates into expenses, debt payments, and the black hole of daily living costs. This isn't people being lazy. This is people getting absolutely crushed by the math of modern life. Why is the savings rate so brutally low? Because people are being forced to make an impossible choice: save for the future or survive right now. And survival is winning every time. When your rent jumped 30% over 3 years, when groceries cost 25% more than they did in 2020, when your car insurance somehow doubled for absolutely no reason, you don't have spare cash lying around to save. You're not building wealth, you're desperately plugging holes. Now let's talk about housing, because this is where the financial squeeze becomes crystal clear. If you're a renter, the statistics say you're screwed. Nearly 50% of renters reported serious difficulty paying their monthly rent in 2025. Not its tight, genuine, real difficulty. The kind where you're actively choosing between rent and other necessities. The median rent in America hit about $2,000 per month. If you're making the median household income of around $75,000, that rent is eating 32% of your gross income. Financial advisors say you shouldn't spend more than 30% on housing. Most renters are already over that line before they pay for literally anything else. Homeowners aren't exactly living in paradise either. If you bought a house in the last 3 years, you're probably locked into a mortgage rate between 6% and 8%. That's literally double what people were paying in 2020. A $400,000 mortgage at 7% costs you about $2,660 per month just in principal and interest. Add property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, and you're looking at $3,500 to $4,000 every month. For a household making $100,000, that's half your take-home pay going to one single asset. But here's the twisted part. If you already own a home, especially one you bought before 2020, your net worth probably looks absolutely fantastic on paper. Home values shot through the roof. The stock market hit record highs. Your 401k statement makes you feel rich, but you can't eat equity. You can't pay your electric bill with unrealized stock gains. So you've got this bizarre situation where someone's net worth increased by $200,000, but they still feel completely broke because their monthly costs are strangling them alive. This is exactly what I mean by the split-screen economy. Turn on CNBC and you'll see headlines screaming about the S&P 500 breaking records, unemployment staying low, GDP growth looking solid, everything seems perfectly fine. But talk to actual real people and they'll tell you they're drowning. Both things are true at the exact same time. The economy is doing great, the people are not. Credit cards are filling the gap and it's turning into an absolute disaster. Remember that $7,000 average balance? Let's actually run the math on what that costs you. If you're paying 22% interest, which is pretty standard now, and you're only making minimum payments of about $140 a month, it'll take you 94 months to pay that off. That's almost 8 years. And over that time, you'll pay $6,160 in interest alone. You'll pay nearly double what you originally borrowed. The credit card companies know this. They're counting on it. That's their entire business model. They make billions off people who are too broke to pay off their balances but desperate enough to keep charging. And it's getting worse because the psychology of credit cards is vicious. When you're stressed about money, when you're exhausted from working 2 jobs, when you're trying to keep your kid in decent shoes and your car running, you stop tracking every single purchase. You swipe the card and promise yourself you'll deal with it later. Later becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. Suddenly you're one of the 46% carrying a balance. Paying interest on pizza you ate 6 months ago. Debt is also blocking people from making smart financial moves. Let's say you're carrying $132,000 in debt like the average millennial. A huge chunk of that is probably your mortgage, which is fine, that's leverage on an asset that appreciates. But you've also got $30,000 in student loans at 6%, a car payment of $500 monthly at 9%, and maybe $8,000 on credit cards at 20%. Your minimum debt payments alone are probably $2,500 per month. That's $30,000 a year going out the door just to service debt, not to build wealth, not to invest, just to not fall further behind. This is why people can't save. This is why emergency funds don't exist for most households. Every single dollar that could go toward building a cushion is already spoken for. It's allocated to debt payments, inflated living costs, and the increased price of just existing. You're not falling behind because you're irresponsible. You're falling behind because the system is extracting more from you than it used to and your income hasn't kept pace. The numbers prove it beyond any doubt. Adjusted for inflation, wages have barely moved in 20 years for most workers. But costs have exploded. Healthcare, education, housing, childcare, the big unavoidable expenses that you can't just cut out of your budget. Those have all outpaced wage growth by massive margins. So even if you're making more money on paper than your parents did at your age, you're actually poorer in real terms because your purchasing power has been shredded to pieces. This is why so many people feel gaslit when they hear about how strong the economy is. If you're a homeowner who bought before 2020 and you've got money in the stock market, yeah, you probably had a great year. Your net worth went up. But if you're a renter trying to break into homeownership, or if you're living off wages without significant investments, the economy isn't working for you. It's actively working against you. This is the tale of two economies playing out in real time. So where does that leave most people in 2026? Let's talk about the savings rate again, because this number is genuinely alarming. The personal savings rate, which measures how much of their income people are actually putting away, has dropped to around 3.5%. That's pathetically low. Historically, Americans saved closer to 8 or 9%. During the pandemic, when stimulus checks hit and people couldn't spend on travel or restaurants, the savings rate briefly spiked to over 30%. But now we're back to barely saving anything at all. That 3.5% tells you everything you need to know. People aren't choosing to save less. They literally can't afford to save more. Every dollar is already allocated before it even hits the bank account. Housing is the other massive pressure point squeezing people from both sides. If you're renting, you're getting destroyed. Nearly 50% of renters in 2025 reported difficulty paying their monthly rent. Not struggling to save for a down payment, struggling to make rent at all. And if you're a homeowner, you might own your house, but you're probably trapped by your mortgage rate. If you bought when rates were 3%, you can't move now because selling means financing a new place at 7%. You're stuck. Your house isn't an asset you can leverage. It's a golden cage. The wealth gap isn't just widening anymore. It's becoming a massive chasm. The people who own assets, who bought homes before prices exploded, who have retirement accounts invested in the market, those people are doing fine. Better than fine, actually. Their net worth grew significantly in 2025. But if you don't own assets, if you're starting from zero trying to get a foothold, you're running uphill into a hurricane. The starting line keeps moving further and further away. Here's what really gets me. Those benchmark numbers we talked about earlier, those medians for retirement savings, those debt averages, those aren't aspirational goals. Those are survival metrics, and half the country isn't even hitting them. If you're 45 years old with $50,000 saved for retirement, you're ahead of the median, but you're still nowhere near where you actually need to be to retire comfortably. That $1.26 million number that Americans say they need to retire. At the median savings rate, most people will never get close. Not even remotely close. The system isn't designed for you to win anymore. It's designed to extract. Credit card companies profit when you can't pay off your balance. Landlords profit when housing costs consume 40% of your income. Employers profit when wage growth stays flat while productivity soars through the roof. You're not failing. You're being failed by a structure that prioritizes profit extraction over financial stability for working people. But here's what you can actually control. You can't fix the entire economy. You can't lower interest rates or make rent affordable. But you can stop measuring yourself against averages that are inflated by outliers. You can stop feeling behind just because some chart says you should have more. If you have anything saved at all, you're ahead of 24% of Americans who have nothing. If you're making progress on debt, even if it's slow, you're moving in the right direction. The economic landscape is harsh and brutal, but you are not powerless. Focus on the gap between what you earn and what you spend. That's your margin, that's your weapon. Even if it's small right now, that gap is what eventually becomes your emergency fund, your down payment, your escape hatch from paycheck to paycheck living. It won't happen overnight, it might take years, but the alternative is staying trapped in the cycle forever, and that's not an option. Numbers don't lie, but they also don't tell you what to do next. If you're sitting here realizing you're behind the median or worse, way behind, don't spiral into panic. The averages are broken, the system is extracting, but you're not powerless. Start small, track the gap, build the margin, and stop comparing yourself to people whose wealth came from timing and luck you didn't have. You're not in a race against them, you're in a fight for your own stability, and that fight is absolutely worth winning.